there's no right or wrong wine. Just try things, and if you like them, Trent, to your comment, if you like it, try it and try different ones.
I love the way that you delivered that, because I didn't expect that.
I love that. It's so much more about the wine. It's a connection to people and also memories and experiences as well.
You have the worst wine in the world, and you go on a great night, and you go home with someone, and you think that wine is a good bottle of wine. Drink the best bottle of wine in the world and go home alone, and I don't care who you are. I am not buying that bottle of wine again.
Today we're on site at Mount Edward in sunny Central Otago, and we're here to chat to partner in winemaker Duncan Forsythe. I'm Jason.
And I'm Trent, and we're here on an unapologetically unprofessional, unfiltered wine journey. And we're saying here, Jace.
Our saying is drink more, try more, learn more. And don't forget to like, comment and subscribe. Duncan, thank you so much for joining us.
It's a pleasure. I was really pleased to hear the unprofessional part, because we do that really well. We're actually professionals at being slightly unprofessional.
Yeah, I think you're being a bit humble there, because you've taken us through a mini tour of the winery and the facilities here, and you definitely know your thing about wine, and we want to dive into that. We're particularly excited about this tasting because it's a bit unique, because we're going to go from the tradition and what Central Otago is well known for into more of the innovative wine and varietals that are coming through. But before we do that, we want to start off with the wind-up's icebreaker questions. So I'll hand over to Trent.
Okay, you must have drank a lot in your past. Is there that most memorable wine or most memorable wine moment that you could share?
Yeah, I think formative years are really important in any winemaker's journey, and I had a number of them before we started, and so I was well placed, I think, to start my career. I remember probably two moments. One was waking up and my pillow was this blow-up wine bag, and I was regretting my journey in wine that evening, and so I understood that not all journeys lead to a satisfactory conclusion. And I think the other one was with my wife, and we were in Burgundy, which is like the spiritual homeland. And you go to places like that with this idea that you're going to have an epiphany, or you're going to drink and meet that moment that defines about who you were, and we suddenly realized that we couldn't afford any of the wine that would give us that. And we were sitting in this vineyard, La Montrachet, so it was the most famous white wine vineyard in the world. And we were drinking out of a plastic cup, and we actually had the remains of someone else's wine that they gifted to us the night before of this wine. So we didn't even buy it ourselves. But it was something I never forget, and I think from that moment on, and it was a really nice wine, but it was more about situation and what a wine is meant to show you place, and it's meant to show, but what it does, I think, is give you an association, and whether it's with people, whether it's with place, whether it's vineyard, or whether it's outside that, the beauty of it should remind you of something. And for me, it was in a beautiful place with somebody I love, and we had a great time, and even if it was in a plastic cup and it was somebody's leftovers, it was still probably the best wine I've had.
I love that. It's so much more about the wine. It's a connection to people and also memories and experiences as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you have the worst wine in the world, and you go on a great night, and you go home with someone, and you think that wine is a good bottle of wine. Drink the best bottle of wine in the world and go home alone, and I don't care who you are. I am not buying that bottle of wine again.
Okay, next one. What's the last bottle of wine that you had?
The last bottle of wine we had was last night, and it was a Sicilian wine, and we drank it at about 2:30 this morning, which is why I'm looking so good for you today. and then we were sent to bed. But I think for us, it's trying wines that you don't often have, and so we try and look. It's not always the best wines, but they're just different. Again, it's a reflection of place and people and where you're from. So from Sicily.
Yeah. Next one, you like to experiment with a few different grape varieties. What's your favorite grape variety?
I think that changes, and it changes because I think right now it's Chenin, and that's what we're going to try a little bit later. And I think it's based on when an experiment does work, and because not all experiments work. So for me, it's the last thing that's worked that I wasn't really expecting it to. So I don't think as a winemaker you really have a favourite grape variety, or a lot don't that I know of. I think it's a favourite style for that moment, or a favourite, and it gives you that moment again. Going back to association.
Okay. Next one. Person, past or present, they'd love to have a bottle of wine with, and also what bottle of wine would that be?
Person, past or present. Okay, that's pretty good. Probably a little bit cliche, but Lily Bollinger, only because she'd bring some bloody good wine to the table, better than I would have. Yeah. Who else? I would say probably. Had to guess someone like Jimi Hendrix, because he's a reprobate, and it's bound to be fun. It wouldn't really matter what wine you had again. And then I think the first really nice bottle of wine I had was from Le Montrachet, and I probably have that with my wife, because she'd kill me if I drank it with anyone else.
Fantastic. Next one. Any unique food and wine pairings? It could be at a music festival with something else.
I think the best breakfast wine is a really low alc Riesling, and generally I would have it with, this sounds terrible, but I would have it with black sausage. I grew up with a German mother, and we basically got that every morning, and that's comfort food for me. And a really low alc sweet Riesling is comfort food, whether it's at 10 in the morning or at 5 in the morning. So that would be for me. That's where I would go.
So black sausage and
Riesling.
And Riesling.
That could come out wrong, but I'm going with it anyway.
Okay, last one. The biggest lesson learned in your wine journey?
Biggest lesson learnt when we first planted our vineyard here, and the region is known for Pinot, and I bought my first vineyard, and there was a group of us who became organic, decided to turn organic and biodynamic, and there's 4 of us, and this was sort of in the late 90s, early 2000s, and we bought over a famous soil scientist, Claude Bourguignon, and he was a scientist to DRC and all the famous domains in the world, in our little world, and I got him I had this bottle of wine, and I thought was fantastic, and I had just planted my entire vineyard in Pinot, and invested all the money I had, and he was in a little hole fossicking around as soil scientists do. I don't even know what they're actually doing, but they've got this little thing, and they're looking at all the soil, and he turned round to me, and I was expecting this great judgment or great sort of clarification of what a brilliant choice I had made, and that greatness was just around the corner, and in the sea of Pinot Noir, he said, "One day you might be able to make some great white wine from the site." and he basically just said, "You've done completely the wrong thing. You clearly don't understand what you're doing. And if you actually want to have a chance at this, you've really, really, really got to do some thinking about what you're doing." Essentially, he was saying, every place has a variety that could do well within it, and you need to understand that. And I didn't understand any of it. So it was probably the most humiliating point of my wine career, but also the most educational. And 15 years later, we've completely replanted that vineyard in white wine, and we'll try one of the white wines that's on that site. So that was probably the worst moment.
Great story. You need that kind of constructive criticism.
Well, there's one
sometimes.
more actually. That was probably the most humiliating, and the best moment, but possibly it could have been humiliating. Is we've sort of had this moment about 10 years where we sort of started producing wine and wanted to be a natural wine producer, whatever that means. And we'd started not using any sort of preservative and not filtering our wines. And I went to this wine tasting and had a Riesling, like a dessert wine. And so it's got a lot of sugar in it, a dessert wine. And that was the last wine of the tasting. And there was probably about 50 or 60 people. And I opened the wine, and it started to fizz, and it was meant to be a still wine, and so obviously some yeast had started fermenting all the sugar, and I had to open these wines and pour them, and by the time I had finished pouring all of this wine to this wine crowd that I had managed to fool up until this point, thinking I was both professional and the wines were amazing, there was absolute silence as they were looking at this fizzy wine in their glass that was meant to be this beautiful still dessert wine. And all this time I was thinking, you better think of something good. This is you need to get your brain into action right now. And I was sweating it. Yeah. And I finished and turned around and I just said, and this is our new Prosecco-style of Riesling. And everyone went, oh, this is fantastic. Which taught me a little lesson, A, that that I could bullshit in the moment, but also it's about perception. And the wine actually tasted okay. It certainly wasn't what I was intending, but it's about perception and association, and your understanding or your thinking about what people like is irrelevant in some ways. It's all about enjoyment, and so it taught me a lot.
Sometimes the greatest thing comes through accidents. Are you still making that Prosecco Riesling, or?
Yeah, well, kind of. We are. Yeah, you're right. And I'll show you one. I'll show you a couple actually as we go through. Yeah, we are. So I think in probably around, we started with Pinot Noir, which is what we've got in here, and we gradually started experimenting more and more. So we would be known, I think, as one of the more avant-garde wineries in New Zealand. And all that means, a fancy way, you would never say that in New Zealand because everyone would go, avant-garde, what a plonker. Why would you use such a word? But all it means is trying new styles and new techniques with either existing varieties or new varieties. And I think it's important you learn. It's more fun. And if you look at what's happening for me as a generational change, everyone's trying new things, and everyone wants to try different things in different ways. And I think it's really important to recognise that that's not only fun, but it's what's happening out in the world of wine. Yeah. And wine is traditionally quite conservative and pretty slow based. So we're still experimenting. We're still making mistakes. Yeah. If you experiment and you want to do things, you have to accept you're going to make mistakes. And so, yeah, we're doing a bit of both.
Fantastic. That's the icebreaker questions.
That's the icebreaker questions. And a couple of times there, you've mentioned the Pinot in front of us. So I think it's a good time for us to try and taste the Pinot in front of us. Trent, did you want to grab that and just show it to the camera there? And like I said at the start, this is exciting in terms of a tasting because we're going to start off with the traditional and what Central Otago is known for, and then delve off more specifically into the innovation that Mount Edward has. Did you have any particular stories about this Mount Edward Susan's 2021 Pinot?
Well, we make, so Pinot Noir the region is young. And we started the first, I know that you've been to Ripon, which was the first winery and vineyard to start, and amazing wines, amazing place. And they were really planting in the 70s and 80s and started. And luckily for a region, one of the first varieties to be planted was Pinot Noir. And you've got to figure that you get one chance a year when you make wine. It takes you all year to grow a crop, and you make it, and then you don't see the result of it for a year or two. In this case, we've got the Susan's 21 in front of us here. So when 2025, 4 years later, you see the results. So it's a really long, slow process. So as a region, we were really lucky to right at the start plant Pinot Noir. So you could learn every year, and you learn off each other. So this quickly became the one red variety that the region was known for. And luckily, it suits it. Pinot Noir needs cold and hot weather, and it's known as a cool climate variety. So it's like Riesling or Chardonnay, Pinot Gris. There's a few of them. There are lots of them. And so this is the first wine we planted. And I think red wine and Pinot Noir has a way of speaking of place, and people talk about that all the time, and they talk about a wine should be representative of place, and what they really mean is that the weather influences the way the grapes are grown and therefore how they taste. They mean the soil influences the way that the plants grow and therefore influence the fruit and therefore influence the way that the grapes taste. Are they full and rich? Do they have tannin? What sort of fruit is there? Is it vibrant? Does it have a lot of acidity? That sort of thing. And then you as a winemaker get to pull levers. And by that I mean, how hot do you want the fermentation? How many times do you get someone to plunge the grapes? You've seen photos of people with their feet in the vat and moving it around. And we saw a little bit of that before. Very clean feet, I might add. And that extracts flavour and colour. All those things influence a way wine tastes from a particular region. So this wine for us, this wine here is a reflection of that.
Yeah.
And then finally, it's about how you deliver a wine. We're sitting here, we've got nice glass. Yeah. The wine is at a great temperature, and so at that point, it's about how you feel what the wine tastes like. Yeah. And so maybe before I answer about the particular wine that we're talking about, have a taste of the wine and go, well, how does this taste? How does this, taste to you guys? And then I'll deliver an opinion on what we would expect this wine to taste like.
Yeah. For me, it's actually quite well balanced between that fruit aspect to it. There's a hint of a savory piece to it. It's not too savory, but there's like a textural, almost like a powdery, chalky feel I have on my mouth, which I really enjoy. What are you getting?
Actually, the nose doesn't translate to what I taste like, and the nose actually smells like a bit meaty.
Yep.
Almost like when you go to like a nice butcher, you have that kind of like those kind of sweet meats and you put in the fridge, that kind of smell. But then when you taste it, tannins are big.
Yeah.
And acids also, the drive is right through as well.
Yeah.
So I get that. And it's more, maybe on the kind of more purplish kind of spectrum, like not red fruits, or it's more kind of darker fruits kind of coming through.
Okay. So when you grow grapes, that fruit component, when you taste them, when they start to ripen, you walk through your vineyard and you'll get lots of stories and people say, we walk through the vineyard and we taste the grapes. And really what they're doing is as it ripens, it goes from red fruit to a darker fruit to plums. So whether it's 1 week or 2 weeks that the grapes are ripening, you can change and decide when you want that flavour. So first of all, you can pick that. The tannin in wine, so tannin comes from skins and it comes from seeds and it comes from stalks. It's almost like a pastry and a pie. It holds that together. It gives it some structure. So I was saying before, like tannin is like a skeleton in the wine. So if you have lots of tannin, you've got a big skeleton. You need lots of fruit. So for us, we have small amount of tannin and fine tannin, so it's quite a small structured wine. We harvested the grapes probably 2 or 3 weeks after they started becoming ripe, so it's less about the red fruit and sort of a bit more about the darker fruit. And then when a wine ages a little bit, those fruits change. So I use a really simple analogy, like if you ever make a casserole and you take it out of the oven, and as soon as you take it out of the oven, you taste all the flavors, whether it's rosemary or whether it's you've added this flavor, all that sort of thing. And you can taste those things and they're quite edgy. 2 days later, and you're going for the leftovers, and there's always this sort of moral sense of guilt, but actually often it tastes so much better. And it's all complex and it's savory. So those savory things come from a bit of age. So I bought you this wine, but this is not actually the wine I'm tasted. So this is the first thing when people come. And why I didn't give you this is part of what we've tried to do in our experimentation is to experiment with delivery and how people get their wines and how they do that. Back in 2010, we were the first people to sell our wine in keg on tap. There's a very famous chef in New Zealand called Al Brown, and he started a restaurant in Auckland called Depot and basically changed fine dining to casual dining, still with really good food, and in this case, really good wine, but we changed the delivery of it. So even though this is Susan's vineyard, one of our single vineyards, and it does have darker flavours and it does have that savoury, meaty flavour, what I actually got you was a wine that's been open for nearly 5 weeks.
Yeah.
So this wine I poured you has been open for 5 weeks, and you're going, how can a wine be open for 5 weeks? Well, we want to try and reinvent various categories, not just varieties and not just techniques, but things that people have drunk or haven't drank. So this wine was opened 5 weeks ago, and it's a reinvention of that very first moment in my life where I realized wine might not be good or could be.
Yeah.
And it's a reinvention of the classic bag and box wine.
Yeah.
And why we decided to do that is that the technology around this has completely changed.
Yeah.
The problem with these style of wines originally was that the plastic and the bag would let air in really quickly, so wines would go off quickly.
Yeah.
And one way of preserving wine is a lot of sugar. Sweet wines last longer than dry ones. So people would put a lot of sweetness in it. And then air would go quickly into the bag, so people would use a lot of preservative in it. The preservative generally is sulfur dioxide.
Yeah.
Most things have it. There's more preservative in a dried apricot than there is in a glass of wine.
Yeah.
Especially if you, at our end of the market, organic made wine has very little preservative. You simply don't need it.
Yeah.
So the technology now has changed where you can not only put really good wine in something like that and it lasts a long time, you can also completely, it's soft plastic recyclable, so you can recycle everything. The actual carbon footprint of those are now about 60% less than a bottle of wine. Yeah. So by the time you've made a bottle and you've transported it and you buy the capsule and you do all of that, it's about a 60% larger footprint using this. And then lastly, a lot of my friends don't want to drink a bottle of wine a night or over 2 nights. They'd like a glass of wine, and then 4 days later they want another glass of wine. And these days, you open a nice bottle of this and you have to drink it.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you're paying for $40 for a glass of wine, effectively. Well, that was open nearly 6 weeks ago, and it's still a nice glass of wine.
So there's no oxygen that's going into it because you haven't opened it up like a bottle, so you don't need to put argon gas or something else like that.
What it does is pulls a vacuum. So it pulls a vacuum instead of letting air in. But what happens is actually air goes really, really slowly into the bag.
Yeah.
But with the technology they have now, it takes we think over 8 weeks before you even notice a change. So you can put really good wine in there. You can have a glass every 4th day, and suddenly you're drinking well. You're not wasting wine. You're not wasting your money, and you don't have to have a bottle of wine overnight. So for us, part of what we've done, I mean, we were the first to do the keg wine. We want to change the way that you can deliver good wine so people can have it on their own terms rather than going, if I open a bottle of wine, I've got to have this in a night or 2 nights. Well, that was changing,
I feel like you've got another surprise under the table. Have you got something else? I want to talk more about this, but
it was. No, it was really a big surprise.
Oh,
it was the original keg that we used.
Oh, wow.
To serve wine, and so this is a beer keg that people traditionally use. Well, there's a little coupling at the top, and when you fill a keg, you use a little decoupler, and you basically just. You put a little couple on, you open the tank, and the wine pours in and fills it.
Yeah.
At the other end, you push it with gas, argon, and the wine comes out and delivers it. Well, there's no effective difference. It's actually less intrusive for the wine.
Yeah.
And so we started doing this about 10 years ago, or 11 years ago, at this restaurant called Depot that I mentioned.
Yeah.
And it was the first time that wine had ever been poured in a different way than out of a bottle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And wines, it's brilliant because it's a drink that you can pick up and just enjoy. For most people, if you enjoy it, it's good, and all power to you. But it's also one of the few things in the world, tea maybe, chocolate, where you can pick up a glass of wine and you can tell it's a red wine. You can tell, in this case, it's a Pinot.
Yeah.
It's a Pinot because it's got lighter tannins. It's more red fruit. It tends to be more fruit driven in a sort of cherry plum sort of fashion. You can tell that it comes from New Zealand because of all the places that grow Pinot. Actually, it's more fruit precise than many places. You can tell within New Zealand that it comes from Central Otago because with all the places in Central Otago to have vibrancy. That's what Central Otago has, but it also has acidity and freshness. Within Central Otago, it's got a bit of meatiness and a bit of darkness. Well, where you can get those flavours are limited to a couple of vineyard areas. Bannockburn, mainly Bannockburn, so that's Felton Road and Kenmure, tend to make wines that are a bit darker. Within those areas, there's only 5 or 7 wine producers. Of the wine producers who make more softer textured wines, we would be one of the main ones.
Yeah.
And of our 2 vineyards in Kenmure, Susan's vineyard in this case has the most sort of savoury and fine tannins of all of that. And then you can tell which vintage it came from and the year it was made.
Yeah.
So wine has this great capacity to be, and that's why people get all geeky on it.
Yeah.
Because you can pick something and go, I know exactly where, who, when,
It's a fun game
from,
for that.
or you can just go, oh, this is delicious. And I'm going on a great date. What's not to like?
But not many of them probably have it in this format.
No, because that's a perception.
Yeah.
It's all about perception.
Yeah.
Because you think it's got to be bad. Well, it doesn't actually.
And I love the way that you delivered that because I didn't expect that. I don't know if you expected that. I hadn't seen
I
you
love the
sneak
packaging
this
as
in
well.
at all.
Yeah, like I think you've got wine is about, it's not in a box, so think outside the box. It's got to, people want to feel good about their choice. So many people with wine think it's subjective. So if you go to a restaurant, I mean, you guys, I'm sure, and now your friends will be going, oh, you know something about wine, you choose. It's one of those things people think you either get it right or wrong. Well, it's not really like that. And so for us, it's really important to deliver it in a package that makes people feel good about the style, the choice. They don't have to feel bad about explaining it to their friends. They can go, check this out. And it's a topic of conversation.
Yes.
It should elicit conversation. It should be a social lubricant, not just in the form of, having a glass of wine and therefore having some alcohol. It's not really about that. It should be something that has a range of flavors, has a range of stories to elicit.
Yeah.
And if you can do that, then for me that's job done.
Yeah, it certainly surprised me, and I like the fact that that's the case. I like the fact that I actually enjoy the wine, regardless of the format that's delivered. I like the preservation aspect of it as well. How is the market responding to this? Is it in New Zealand? Is there a greater choice of people wanting to try wine from this kind of format?
It's we've only been going 6 months, and we have a really good friend, Dicey, who we share the machine with, who had a wine called Dice, also doing that. Within the 2 of us, we've discovered that most people, once they know it's good or have tasted that it's good, and once they're not embarrassed about referencing back to something that they didn't think was good, people love it. This is probably of an age group that's 40 plus.
Yeah.
Anyone that's sub 40, that's not even something they're thinking about. And so, but it's an introduction because most people who are selling the product are owners of places that are in that age group who understand there's a reticence. So for us, it's about getting out there, tasting the wine with people, showing it to them, and 90% of the people are all over it.
Yeah.
And as long as they can get over themselves, it's done. So it's about putting
the message out.
Really message and about putting good product in there.
Yeah.
Making sure it is good.
Yep.
And then people are going, well, why don't I? So great, but it's a slow process.
Where'd you get the idea from? Like, is it done anywhere else in the world, or are you guys?
Bag and box of wines have done for 30 or 40 years, and we wanted to try and reinvent it. And I think the worst thing about the wine industry is that it's subjective. The best thing is that it's subjective. If you like it, it's good, but it stops people wanting to be part of it. And I think the idea came from in that 2009 when I went to see my wife and we drank that bottle of leftovers. We also saw people drinking different styles of wines. They weren't drinking what we thought they were. And this is people in my own industry, they were drinking chilled wines. Well, chilled red wines in New Zealand, people are going, what are you doing? This is, you can't do that. You're not meant to do that. Well, who said you can't do that? Who said you can't drink it out of a glass jar? All of a sudden that opened our eyes up to styles of wines and new techniques and new ways of delivery. If you look back, this sounds like an older person talking, which it is, but that was the start of social media. That was the start of beer suddenly putting in all these sets of flavors, and all of that had the impact where people weren't listening to a really narrow subset of people telling them that's what they had to do. So suddenly you were telling your buddies, try this, and they were like, what do you mean it's been flavored with a banana? And they drink it and they go, that's okay. That gives me license to taste anything. So what people are starting to taste, that's where natural wine started from. That's where anything has gone. So people are starting to taste new things and new styles. And we just came back and went, we've got an industry here where everybody's trying to be the same thing, that white tablecloth, fine wine, and that's fantastic, and I get all of that, but none of my friends are like that. And so we just went, right, we've got to, start changing what we do and how we deliver it to reach a completely different audience, an audience that I actually relate to rather than the other one. And that's when we started changing.
That whole message about doing things differently and interesting. I mean, listening to you from this morning to now, I feel like that's what's different that's what makes Mount Edward special. There is that innovation, and we have an opportunity here in front of us.
Before we go, there's only one con I have. Like, it's a very uncomfortable pillow. If you use that, right?
I know. It's quite small. The chances of slipping off and you're ending up with your head in the tap is quite high. But, that's
good
right.
For back stretching, probably. But innovation, like we said here, what we've got is the Mount Edward Vermouth. And Duncan, I think you were the first one in New Zealand to create vermouth as a winery. Is that correct?
It's certainly in the modern age, there would have been no doubt people making it back and when the New Zealand wine industry first started in the early 20th century, late 20th century, early 20th century rather, and we just looked at it and we were a very traditional style of winery.
Shall we pour this?
This was our old label. This is what we started with, and so really sort of classical, and it's sort of old school. There's nothing wrong with it, and it's what we started with, and then if we go back to 2008, 2009, we were just making Pinot Noir, a little bit of Riesling, and then it was the last time that, it was like now, the GFC, it was called the GFC, and the last time there was a worldwide recession. And the first things that get hit are hospitality, wine industry, all that sort of thing. And we were struggling. At the same time, I went over to France and saw my wife and realised that people were drinking different things. So we came back and said, well, we've got to try different things. And one of the varieties, so we planted a whole lot of varieties. We planted Gamay, we planted Albarino, Chenin Blanc, which is what this is made of. Pinot Blanc. We started making orange wines. We started making a whole lot of different, put it in keg, everything. We wanted to experiment, and we wanted to, be ahead of the curve, or not even on the curve, as you when you make mistakes. So we started making Chenin Blanc. Now, when you start making a wine and growing it, you've got to find the sweet spot for growing it, and you've got to find the sweet spot for how you make it. If you look at a food analogy, say you're trying to make your own squid at home, very easy to have something that is rubbery and horrible, and it's a way of cooking it that you find. So for us, it was about discovering, how do you do that? The first couple of attempts were terrible. You never say that. Everybody always says, this wine is fantastic, or, nothing ever goes wrong. Well, that's not true in any kitchen and anything when you're trying new things. So we needed a whole process. But when you plant something, you got to have a B plan. And what do you do with it? You planted a whole vineyard, and you've got to make the wine nicer, because you got to sell it. You still got to sell it to have a business. So we looked at that, and we looked at what was happening in New Zealand around 14, 15, and gin was going nuts, like it has gone everywhere. And we looked at that, and we looked at our label, and we thought, that's really old school. We've got to change that. And we went, well, how do we do this? And a good friend of mine, and I'll give him credit where credit's due. There's a guy, Mike Benny, who runs a great wine store, P&V, in Newtown and Sydney, amongst other things. And he was like, well, why don't you try vermouth? And no one at that point had made a vermouth. So we came back and said, okay, well, let's give this a go. So vermouth is wine, can be white, red, can be dry or sweet. And it would have been the original way that people would have preserved wine. So by that, you can add alcohol, like, say, port is fortified. And as soon as you add alcohol to a wine and it goes above about 16.5%, then the rate that the flavour declines is really, really, really slow. So you fortify the wine, and then you add botanicals, so herbs to give it a flavour. The one thing you've got to add is wormwood. Wormwood gives you bitterness. So if you imagine Negroni is bitter from the Campari, or so any cocktail that has a bitter line through it, that's what gives it. So you add wormwood, and then you can add anything else. We did it with, and we added elderflower. So give it sort of a very aromatic way.
So wormwood is a herb?
Wormwood's a herb. It's
not a worm, then.
Not a worm. It's a little herb. And then the other herbs you can add anything to. So we decided to make the first vermouth. And really it was like the old bottle that we had, no self-respecting cocktail bar is going to have that behind their bar. It's all about image.
Yeah.
And at the same time we're going, well, actually, there's an old truism in wine: your best customers die first, and it's actually something I made up, but I think it's true, and it's old because I'm a bit older than you guys. So an old truism, but it's the people with money who are in their 50s and 60s who can afford to buy an expensive bottle of wine. Yeah. Well, they're the first ones who are not going to be buying your wine in a few years' time. Yeah. We wanted to start selling our wines to other people and our drinks. And so vermouth was one way of entering that market and changing. So we made the vermouth going, well, we're going to go into cocktail bars and we're going to start introducing our brand to a whole different range of people. And doing so, we needed to change the packaging. So what you see there is in our winery, there's lots of art, and there's lots of everything from graffiti to lots of different paintings. It's all of the flavors in that bottle are in the hair of that, in the head style of the figure. Yeah. And then, so this is a drink that you can have. We've got a little bit of ice and a little bit of orange peel, and you can either have by itself as an aperitif, or you could have as a spritzer. So this is like elderflower. People would have had this traditionally either before dinner or after dinner as an aperitif, as I said, or as a digestive.
Well, so, I'm very excited about it because I do love a Negroni, and this is a key part of that.
I know, delicious drink.
Yeah. But the aromatics you get straight away.
Mm.
You know what? When you have a Negroni, it's very powerful. Obviously, it's mixed in with 3 other liquors and so forth.
Yeah, so you could, I mean, it can be used in a martini, in a Negroni.
Yeah.
And then over summer, if you turn that drink, you put a little bit, this is a bit of soda that we did before, and then suddenly you've got a spritzer. And so you go, and suddenly you've got and you can add anything to that.
Yeah, completely. We're here in the Central Otago sun. It's kind of moved behind some trees right now, but
I know.
you can feel like just that moment, like you're talking about moments and experiences. Enjoying this in the sun would be delicious. Yeah.
And so for me, it's going, here's a wine, and we'll get to the actual Chenin in a minute. That actually the variety can make a whole range of styles of drinks, and even within that you can have it within a whole range of situations. And so all the people who are saying, I don't like wine but are loving a Negroni, or I don't like wine but I'm having a vermouth, and going, well you actually do, but just in a different way. And if we can be part of that change up that says, actually this is a much bigger picture, or something that you can have in a whole sets of different ways, then that brings people into our world.
Yeah. I don't drink much vermouth, but I think I have this perception before where vermouth is like this really high alcohol type of drink, similar to the absinthe or something like that. I think that's where they kind of differ. So like gin's like this kind of cool drink, right? Which is you can kind of sip at. But now having tried this, it kind of feels like in that kind of same spectrum where it is like summer's on the beach having.
And I think it's because it's one of those things that people have very rarely, and it's fallen out of favour. I didn't drink it because it was the only thing my grandparents' cocktail cupboard that was there. So you're like, I don't want that. And then people are rediscovering it, that it doesn't have to be something big. It doesn't have to be a spirit. You don't have to drink something for its effect. You can drink something for its taste. That's now 5%, 4%. It's a delicious, just really refreshing drink that you can have on a summer's day that we've almost having.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, just purely based on the 2 drinks that we've tasted so far, there's this strong sense of creativity, innovation. It's also confidence to be able to not do what everyone else is doing. You got to have some balls to kind of go, look, I'm not going to follow everyone else. Where does that come from for you?
Oh, look, I think if when we started selling the wine and keg, and it went back to that moment, that was a pivotal moment for us. And before that, it was all about the sommelier culture with the tablecloth, the napkin and the fine wine, and that's so intimidating for people. We started selling wine on keg, and before we started, I probably fielded 10 phone calls from people in my industry going, this is terrible. You're dumbing down the wine industry. You're going to cheapen what we do. Why are you doing that? This is terrible. And so on the one hand, I was thinking, oh, am I making a terrible mistake here? And we sent up a keg of wine to the restaurant, and a keg of wine fits 2.5 cases of normal bottles of wine. 2.5 cases. If you sell 2.5 cases to a restaurant, that is a good client. That is a great client. The guard dog is also very effective when you have good wine. And so if you sell that amount of wine to somebody, that's great. So we sent 2 cases of wine, 2 kegs to the restaurant, 5 cases of wine, and we thought that would be fantastic. And the restaurant opened on the Friday morning. Saturday morning, my friend rang me up and said, we've sold the 2 kegs of wine last night. So 5 cases of wine. And not only that, they were pouring it in little glass tumblers, not even a glass. And people were coming in and going, thank goodness, I'm finally in a place where I can relax. That's considered normal now. But 2010, 15 years ago, that was not normal. And people were going, oh, and you could see it in the way that they relaxed and they were talking, and it was social and everything was right about the situation, and they could enjoy themselves. Well, I only had sent up 2 kegs, so I was
Yeah.
crapping myself.
Yeah.
And so he said, "What?" And he said, "What are you going to do?" And I said, "Don't worry, I won't let you down." And then I put down the phone and I thought, "Oh my goodness, I'm in trouble. I am about to let him down." So I went to the airport with 2 kegs of wine and flew it up as luggage. And every day for the next day for a week, I flew up 2 kegs of wine with my luggage, got in a taxi, delivered it to the restaurant, and came back and filled them up until we had enough kegs that we could do it from a transportation. Long story short, that just said to me that you can experiment and you can do things differently.
Yeah.
You got to take a risk and things go wrong, but even that is okay and it's more fun. So you take a risk and you work out what the implications are and you have B plans. So the next risk, and we still hadn't been able to make Chenin Blanc properly, was looking at what was happening, and the natural wine movement was starting all in that sort of 2013, 2014. We had long turned organic. We were certified organic early 2000s. And as part of that, you get exposed to all people who are thinking differently, because at that stage, being organic or biodynamic was considered on the left-hand side of the ledger. Really, you were odd.
Yeah.
But people who are odd congregate together. It's like smokers now, they're outside, forced outside into these little huddles.
Let's hang out. Yeah.
And the wine game, that was us going, this is what we're doing. What are you doing? And it wasn't accepted.
Yeah.
And so you band together, but there's strength in that. And so we started experimenting back in 2012, and we started making petnat out of 13 out of the Chenin Blanc as well. Now, petnat is pétillant naturel, natural sparkling wine. Effectively, it's like a cloudy cider, hazy IPA, and you basically bang a cap on it before it's finishing fermenting. So it's still got fizz. It's got a bit of fruit, and it's sort of like a Prosecco-style wine. So if we go back to the earlier one, we were making strides with our Prosecco.
Yeah, you were getting there.
Yeah, we
you
were
didn't know
getting
that
there,
at that time.
And so this is Chenin Blanc, petnat, and we started it. Now it's by no means always successful, these things. So this is one of our first iterations of this wine. And so I guess again, this is something that as people change generations, they want to take ownership of what they do and have their own things. And petnat is just sparkling wine, and it can be made traditionally like champagne is, or like this. And I think this is a style and a form that people can take. It's meant to be a fun drink, and it's not meant to be super serious. So this one of the first wines we made. It's more flatnat than petnat.
Yeah.
And it's not always easy to make. And so you want to retain the fizz. And so what I've done here is I've got our next version of it. And when you experiment, you don't always get things right.
Yeah.
And as you don't get things right, you've got to, it's not that you've got to own your mistakes, but you've got to look at them and be quite honest with them. So we've got 2 versions of this, and the very next version is a year later. And there's two real changes to this wine. And so we've got this one, and one of them is making sure that we kept, when you make a wine, you need to keep things warm. And we walk through the winery, and we've got little heaters everywhere and electric blankets, and we didn't keep that wine warm for long enough. And so this suddenly we went, right, we're gonna look after this wine. And the second one is that you've got to reassure people what they're drinking is really good. So we actually, instead of putting a cap on, put a cork in there, and people suddenly go, I'm drinking a sparkling wine. And so in New Zealand, it's quite conservative. In a lot of countries, I wouldn't have bothered, but you need to bring people along on the journey. And so that almost gave people reassurance of trying things.
Yeah.
When you go to places, to different restaurants or different bars, And the reason why you try different things is because you trust people. You trust that establishment. They trust you
Yeah.
to go, what you're talking about is you're delivering on it. But yeah, exactly. And so part of that for us is putting a cork in that and going, actually, trust us that this is sparkling wine and trust us is what we're doing. So suddenly you've got a wine that has a bit more fizz, and that was just doing one of these things that we didn't get quite right. And then secondly, a much like the packaging for the big TED in the box, it's like actually it is a style that you can relate to.
Yeah, you're familiar with it.
So yeah, it's a weird juxtaposition. It's not just about the wine; it's about reassurance. It's back to that association.
But you're saying this is still the same petnat. You've just changed the
the way we've made it, and we've changed the way the top.
But it's labeled as a sparkling, not petnat. Yeah, okay. Got it. Wow.
Well, petnat is sparkling. But if you call it petnat, people go, what's that? What are they trying to do? You know? And so you need reassurance in decision-making because wine, again, it's its own worst enemy, and it's all subjective. So suddenly you taste it, you've popped the cork, your own expectations of it have changed.
Well, you could see obviously there was more foam and gas that was coming through, but the smell is quite different as well. It's got this bready, honey kind of sweetness.
Yeah, and that I think is when you make a sparkling wine and you see that haziness that you get in a cloudy cider or hazy IPA and in some petnat. What that is yeast, and when the yeast ages in a bottle, it gives you that savoury, bready, toasty note. So the longer you age it, the more you have of that. So not only did we keep it warmer, but we kept it a little bit longer before we released it. And so that again is sort of a lever that you can pull. It's like making a stock, and you reduce the amount of stock, it becomes more concentrated. The longer you leave it in that bottle, the more savouriness you get in that.
Yeah, I think it's important to just try everything and make your own opinion decisions on whether you like it or not. I think we're often influenced by what other people say, or like the industry or consumers or critics, like people say, a lot of people poo-poo petnat, and go, oh, not another petnat, but then I kind of like it. Like there's a time and place for the petnat.
Yeah, 100% right. If you like something, then try it. And everyone else, you'd be damned. It's like, what?
Yeah.
And I think that always when you try new things and experiment new things, especially new techniques or varieties like petnat, as makers, you're not going to get it right. I've just showed you one that we didn't get right, and then suddenly, we've worked it out. So there's a bit of going along with it as well, and going, oh, how is this evolving, and how is this getting better? and it's like it's like a fashion label, or it's like a musician, or it's like anyone. They evolve, and you're going, okay, well, do I like what they're trying to do, and therefore do I stick with them?
It's really challenged my perception of petnat, and I have to admit I haven't had much. I've probably had two tastes of petnat, and I'm thinking, oh, it's going to be some funky, cloudy smell, but both of them actually weren't like that at all. So it does make you think you got to keep on trying.
The ones we had before taste a bit like kombucha.
Yeah, and you can do that. When you make a wine, if you expose it to air, you expose it to a thing called acetic acid bacteria. Well, acetic is vinegar, and it can make a wine that tastes like vinegar.
Yeah.
And people go, oh, that's how it's meant to taste. Well, no, actually, it's meant to taste delicious, And so therefore, it's not meant to taste like that. Yeah. So it is about finding things that you like, and if we move from this, the next thing we tried to do was we still hadn't made that wine.
So this is the ongoing evolution, and I like this continual practice of refining, continuous improvement.
Yeah, so look, if you see the wines from the Jura, which is a region of France, or you see wines from Jerez, which sherry region in Spain, this is the kind of wines that they might make.
So do you get that bacterial flora as well?
But this is basically, again, a wine that's fortified, like the vermouth, but instead of adding botanicals to it, you actually slowly oxidize it, let it go off. And if you want a reference point to what I mean, it's like browning butter. And if you brown butter in a pan, you're not burning it, you are changing the flavor of it really quick because it's heated, and so it might only take 30 seconds. But if you take that process over years and lower the temperature, you still can do the same thing. So with this wine, we're changing the taste of it. And if you were drinking an Oloroso-style sherry or something like a Sauvignon from the Jura, it's basically a pure taste sensation. So this wine is 4.5 years old. We started doing this 9 years ago. We fortified the wine, which again slows the rate that it changes, and we fill the barrel half full of Chenin Blanc, and right at the end we're going to taste the finished Chenin Blanc, and we slowly let it oxidize, and we slowly let it go off. And it turns into a wine that's a complete taste sensation. So this is something that you would have with an olive. This is where you need a food pairing, something salty like some prosciutto or an olive or an oyster, and it just is a pure taste sensation. But if you're going to Portugal or you go to Spain or you go to the Jura, these are the style of wines that you would have.
The Comte cheese we got back in
100%,
there we go.
100% Comte. No one makes this here. We have no reference points, and it's a pure geekery wine. We make 20 cases of this a year, and somebody comes in that is just like wants to try something unusual. We've got that for them. So
that nutty kind of honey kind of flavors.
Yeah, totally. It's so weird.
Caramel.
And it's generally, I apologize for not having an olive right then and there. You would need that. It's a taste sensation. So again, it's taking a wine or a variety and turning it into something completely different that you don't get to try anywhere else.
Yeah. It's certainly the theme that I get from you and this winery, Mount Edward. It's innovation. It's wanting to experiment. If we kind of think about what else is coming, what's the future look like for Mount Edward? Is there any new things that are popping up? Because it just seems like a cycle.
Hopefully, profitability. Oh, look, I think for me, it's about energy, and we brought in we're opening our cellar door, and I think the newest thing is that we've always been quite a small sort of place out of the way that's been undiscovered, and quite comfortable with that. But we want to be able to bring people here. So what we've done is completely change our cellar door, and you've had a wee look around, and we're essentially changing it into a wine bar. Not that people will know it as a wine bar, but when they come in, we want people's experience of a cellar door to be able to try all these free wines. And we'll finish with the Chenin Blanc, the table wine. But I want you to be able to come in and go, I like white wines, but I want to try something different. And we've got a whole range of something within one variety that you can learn about. Or you might come in and say, I just like red wines. We can try gamay, we can try chilled wines, we can try wine out of a bag and box versus a really old high end wine. We'll serve vintage wines, we'll serve older wines. So I think the new thing for us is making a venue and making our place somewhere that people can have a full sensory experience and a full range of food and wine experiences that they're not expecting from a winery. I think no disrespect to people, but most wineries are incredibly boring. And you walk in and you go, here's our Pinot Gris, and in New Zealand it generally sounds like that, and probably slightly more nasal. And here's our Pinot Gris, and but here it is. They force a taste sensation on you of what they're doing, rather than saying, what do you like, and what do we have that can tick those boxes. but at the end of the day, where you can do it in a relaxed manner. Generally standing in front of a counter. Well, when was the last time you enjoyed a drink standing in front of a counter?
Yeah.
You want to be in a comfy chair, you want some music, you want to be with your friends, and you want to be put in a place where you can enjoy all those things.
Yeah.
And going back to where we started, it is all about association.
Yeah.
And wine has a huge range of styles and varieties and ways to deliver that. And so next for us is being able to show people that.
Yeah, you've really got the consumer in mind, and when you're talking, it's not the traditional wine consumer. It's more trying to open up the circle and say, it's an approachable. It's an approachable.
If I don't approach it from where you're coming from, then what am I doing?
Yeah.
This is not about me. It's about going, what can I do that you would like in a fashion that you would relate to,
and bringing new things, because all throughout this tasting, we've been talking about the Chenin Blanc, and we've been talking about new things, and we're going to talk about the Chenin Blanc right here.
Yeah, finally. It took us about 4 years, and in wine world, we discovered that if we made it like our Chardonnay, which is with oak barrels, older oak barrels, that you get a bit of that savoury flavour with, if you keep it for a long time, then the wine will soften and have a beautiful texture. Yeah. It won't be really sharp or green. It has something that's really luscious. And our house style is about making wines that are texturally really soft and delicious. And so finally it took us 4 or 5 years to make that. In the meantime, we discovered a whole lot of range of other uses for it.
Yeah.
And so, and you've got to do that. At the end of the day, you're a business as well. So you go, how do you do something new that delivers a whole different lot of taste, sensations, and experiences? How can you then put them out in such a way that people can relate to them, but also be true to your craft?
Yeah.
We love doing this. I want to grow and make wines where people can pick them up and look at it in a really super traditional way and go, this is unique to this place and person and time. But at the same time, I want it to be relatable to everybody.
I think that's the two things stand out, like kind of delicious and interesting. Like you don't rest on your laurels saying, hey, I'm just going to do Pinot. I'm going to have this kind of bold ambition to innovate and try new things, which requires kind of big balls to do that, I think, in a sense.
Yeah.
And a lot of experimentation and learning as well.
But, there's lots of different, if I relate back to my friends at Ripon, there's an amazing winery who has a different trajectory. They're all about longevity and intergenerational farming and wanting to have things that speak of place. And I admire and respect them to the nth degree. For me, I can choose a different path and still produce something that I'm equally proud of, that people can relate to in a different way. And I think wine is one of those things that when you look at it, it's not as narrow as people think about it, that it is, and it can have different ways of relating. You've just got to find those people that you relate to, Just choose someone that's doing it and growing it and making it themselves than some big company, for a start off.
Yeah, we're having a chat before about minimal interventionist kind of winemaking, and you say that at the end of it, there's still the winemaker, the team behind it. Yeah. And that kind of brings the personality. I think your personality, which is that kind of fun, interesting drive to innovate, really comes through with all the kind of flight of wines that we've had today. Like everything is different, but interesting, but delicious. It's what kind of comes through.
And for me, if people are happy and they're interested, then they take care of things.
Yeah.
They look after your interest, the wine's interests, and the place's interests. And I think that's really important. And at the end of the day, it's meant to be enjoyable and delicious. Last time I looked, it's not meant to be. Yeah. It's not meant to be a trial or an exam or thing you get right or wrong.
Yeah.
Do many people do Chenin in Central Otago?
There's about 3 or 4.
Yeah,
it's
I don't think of Chenin.
Not very many. Climate change has changed the way what is happening. We've had the 5 hottest years in the last 5 years, and so this is a variety that traditionally would have been grown the best for well known is in Gisborne through Milton.
Yeah.
Hot climate, and so the ability to grow things is changing. Different varieties in different places. But it is a variety like Chardonnay where it can have a distinctive style in a different area. And I think, we're just starting to work that out in Central Otago. And there'll be more varieties as the weather changes and climate changes. And
I haven't had a Chenin like this. It's kind of like
very different to like
mineral.
Margaret River
It's
Chenin.
got a bit of savoury aspect to it at the same time.
Yeah. I mean, Margaret River does have. We were trying.
Very
we were
different.
trying a Lewin Estate wine the other day, and it has a dare I say it would be for such a fine producer. better be careful here, because if I would relate myself to them, I'd be standing on dangerous ground. They're top notch, but texturally and freshness, it has elements of that. For sure.
It's really nice. It has a bit more body to it, but I can't. As you were talking, I couldn't stop going.
It's a variety that has freshness and it's a great sort of variety that can cross boundaries with people where if you're not quite sure what to order for people, it has an element of Chardonnay, has freshness that Riesling has, or it's got some strength of flavour that maybe it's some stronger varieties like Gruner or Gris have. It's not necessarily that flavour spectrum, but it has all these things in there.
Yeah.
So I really like it. I like trying things
it was worth the journey.
that you might fail with, that people haven't done. And then all along, you've got to think of what happens if it doesn't work.
Failure leads to lessons, and that's absolutely what I've been picking up here. We're probably towards the tail end of the interview. Did you have any last questions?
No, I'm good.
Yeah, I think this has been such an interesting interview. To be honest, I had a list of about 10 to 15 questions to ask. And I didn't ask them because the story that you've been sharing has been so unique and distinct to yourself and to Mount Edward.
Yeah.
And you think about that term avant-garde, and I don't use that. I can't even pronounce it properly, but I don't use that very often. But you are forging your own path, and there's a clear kind of distinction between other wineries, and then you're on a different journey and a different path, and we've seen that through these wines here. Did you have any last messages for our Australian audience? Key messages you wanted to share?
Oh, look, I think that so many people, the better wineries are forging their own paths, and there's no right or wrong path. And there's no right or wrong wine. Just try things, and if you like them, Trent, to your comment, if you like it, try it and try different ones. And I guess try them from people who are actually growing them and making them themselves, because they're the ones taking the risks. And then you have a bit of provenance and you have authenticity. And so whoever it is, if it's us, fantastic, come and visit us, da-da-da-da-da. But try it from someone who's doing it themselves and making a go of it, because whatever business you have, that's the sort of people you want to be involved with. And like begets like.
Yeah.
So
you want to be with people that are kind of challenging the norm. I think that's a key
and who
thing.
like different
Evolution
and who like things, creative people. And then so that's the message. Just try things, but try it from people who are actually doing it themselves.
Awesome. Any last reflections, Trent?
I think to his point, it's be true to yourself and try new things. There is. They're often the thought around, I need to try that $200 wine, that $300 wine. But, I'm sure these aren't in that kind of stratospheric kind of price range, but these are delicious. So, trust your own palate, trust your own judgment, try new things, and you might be surprised.
Yeah, look, half the people that come in here, they try the wine in box and you can see they prefer it. And then they get to this and it's twice the price, and they feel as though they have to buy it. And of course, love to sell it, but I think it's trusting your judgment, and it doesn't. If it's a $15 bottle of wine and you like it, you go for it.
Yeah.
And then if it's a $25, go for it. Whatever it is you like, try that, but don't stop trying.
Yeah, absolutely. Duncan, what's your end goal? You have something you want to achieve. Is there, or is it just
I
keep
don't know
on?
that there is.
Yeah.
We have. In my night job, I help run an arts festival. In all of my friends, are all we were talking about creative people and people with flaws and it being more interesting. And I think I just want to carry on being involved with people and in terms of wine, carry on with this. The day we stand still and then the day you stop coming because we're doing the same thing is, the day I should stop.
Yeah.
And so if I can pass on that level of enthusiasm or that desire for creativity, that would be my end goal.
Yeah, I definitely think you're on that path
Yeah.
there. Like I kind of reflect on our visit and our journey here, and it's like the creativity and innovation is part of it, but our underlying theme is kind of breaking down those barriers and not having this snobby wine world that you want to make wine approachable, which is exactly what we want to do as well.
It should be democratic.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Well, why not? And of course, it's got to be good.
Yes.
You get rid of the crappy petnats.
Yeah.
They'll disappear.
Yeah.
But it should be for everybody. So democracy and experimentation in wine, fantastic.
Absolutely. And thank you for sharing your journey and the story of Mount Edward here. Definitely recommend to our viewers and listeners to come out to Mount Edward, Central Otago, have a chat to Duncan. If anything, just have a chat to the people here. There's a great energy and vibe. The music's playing. There's great artwork around here. It's a casual environment where you can enjoy some high quality wine. That's us here at The Wind Up. Thank you, Duncan.
Thank you very much.
As we like to say here, drink more, try more, learn more. Thanks all.